Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest introduced to you now. Logan Duvall is a regenerative agriculture leader, metabolic health advocate, and father who turned his son's stage 4 cancer diagnosis into a relentless mission for truth. Refusing to accept conventional answers, Logan dove headfirst into mitochondrial medicine, redox biology, and electromagnetic health, uncovering how environment, food, and light determine our fate. He founded Sowing Prosperity, a movement to decentralize health through ancestral wisdom, light-based living, and local food systems. As the owner of the Me McGee Market in Arkansas, Logan puts science and soul back into the food chain. Through his podcast and platform, he fuses lived experience with insights from experts like Dr. Jack Kruse, Dr. Nasha Winters, and others, crafting a holistic path to metabolic resilience. Logan's message is simple but urgent. Healing begins at home with the sun on your skin, the dirt under your feet, and real food on your plate. He is a featured panelist at the upcoming Metabolic Health Day 2025 conference, an in-person gathering that brings together trailblazers in metabolic health, environmental medicine, and regenerative food systems. Logan Duvall, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
I appreciate it, Casey. Excited to visit with you.
Oh, it's awesome to host you. It's been a while since we first got introduced and got this scheduled. And I had kind of forgotten how we first got introduced. And it was Buzz and Bruce, our mutual, very good friends, who introduced the two of us. How was it that they met you?
I think just kind of that cancer world's pretty small when you're looking for answers outside of the orthodoxy, and we just crossed paths and hit it off. They're great guys, and they even made the trip through Arkansas, stopped at the market, and we were able to hang out.
That's so awesome. I first met them here in my hometown around Salt Lake City. They came to the Keto Salt Lake Conference, I believe, in 2022. I'm normally one of the only people that sits on the front row of a metabolic health kind of conference, and they were there also. So we were all front row Joes together, and I got to know them, and they're just wonderful, wonderful people. We were so excited to cross paths with them. I've met them, several times at several different conferences. We got to know them and their story, similar to yours with cancer and trying to deal with cancer in an unconventional way. And yeah, they're just wonderful people. It doesn't surprise me at all that they came up to visit you in Arkansas and spend some time with you.
Yeah. It was great. It was great. Bruce runs a Facebook group. We're focused on carnivore and cancer. It's kind of how he got started and focusing on that. And so I had him on the podcast. It's been, Lord, it may have been close to 2 years ago now, but and we were able to introduce a lot of this like sunlight work and seeing that there's more to it than just nutrition and a lot of things that matter a whole lot. And so it's been really cool to kind of see their journey of taking that and running with it and applying it and not just brushing it off and being myopic in their approach and the paradigm. So it's been really cool to see how they've gone with it.
That's awesome. Well, I am certainly excited to chat with you about some of those topics. I think we do get focused a lot on nutrition without realizing how important some of these other things are. I have to admit that I love your podcast and some of the topics that you guys discuss. I have no idea what the hell you guys are talking about, which is cool that I get to learn something different, even if I'm a little bit lost. I don't mind. But you definitely get into the weeds of some of this stuff with some of the experts that we mentioned in the introduction. But before we get to some of that stuff, let's hear about your story, especially as it pertains to cancer and how you started to get focused on, all of these lifestyle factors as, important, not just for cancer, prevention or regression, but also for overall health.
Yeah. So I grew up in a small town in Arkansas that's very agrarian based, and the primary job provider was a pickle plant. So Atkins pickles, a lot of, maybe older people know about that. And so like I grew up in and around agriculture my whole life, and I saw when the pickle plant left our small town, they just decimated the economy, and in ways are still struggling, a couple decades later to try to overcome that. So being able to see that, it was, I think, a really good foundation that I didn't realize I was getting at the time. Then grow up, get into college, and I found my way on an ambulance. So I spent about 8 years working EMS and seeing medicine from the emergency side and how many people are suffering, and so many people taking transfers from smaller hospitals to big hospitals to see specialists, transferring people to hospice. Like it was just nonstop, all the sudden deaths, the chronic side is pretty brutal. Then you got the trauma side that is, fast paced, and it's a completely different game. But from there, those 24-hour shifts were very enlightening on how detrimental they are to health. And I started seeing all my colleagues, everybody was like low testosterone, right? Balding, overweight, were dependent on nicotine and caffeine, and just all of this thing, whether it was fire, police, EMS, it was all of us, even the ER. It's like everybody's health was really suffering. And so obviously I didn't piece it together back then. Got into real estate for a while, and then my grandpa got sick. My grandpa got cancer. First time was non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and then he overcame that, and then came back with esophageal cancer that when it got in the liver, it just went downhill from there. So that whole journey was extremely eye-opening on the caregiver side. My mom and grandma were trying to run the market and take care of my grandpa, and he was doing what he could until he was bedridden. And again, the reason I'm going through some of this stuff is because some things that I did not think were connected are extremely pertinent to everything that I do now, from growing up in a small town to EMS to grandpa's journey. So after he passed away in 2016, I moved, left real estate, left the ambulance to come help, see if I could contribute to the market. And we grew, we did great. We utilized social media. I've got a huge following through Me McGee Market. And boom, one day in 2019, my 5-year-old was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Like, playing around in the sprinklers. That evening, he comes, he says, "Dad, my pee's orange." And it was, to a 5-year-old, it was blood, like he was peeing blood. So got him into the ER, and then, my world completely changed. So from then, it was God's going to do his part, doctors are going to do their part, and daddy's going to do his. So what is my part? What do I do? How do I do everything I can to implement healing for my son? All right. Like, never wanted him to think he was sick. Everything was just to get better, stronger. And so from that, it led me down. I think what all of us start with is like, well, what should we eat? Right? Like, what should we eat? What is that perfect cancer diet, or perfect healthy diet? Right? And you go, uh, vegan and plant-based and keto or carnivore or paleo, right? And all of the different names for whatever the approach is. And I started there, and I asked the oncologist, what do I do? What do I feed him? He's like, oh, it doesn't matter. Just don't lose weight. And I was like, this just really doesn't make any sense that you would tell me that. And then try to hand him a Sprite and a candy bar, right? Like, this is nuts. So just going through all of that and having to figure out those answers, like what should he eat, has led me to, a place I never would have dreamed of, talking about visual and non-visual photoreceptors, right? But like, that dietary focus first, nutrition definitely was the launching board, and how, how we even got here.
Wow, that's crazy. Okay, I've got several questions. I want to go back to your time in emergency services. You mentioned the chronic and you mentioned the acute. I think this is fascinating. I ask everybody who's been involved anywhere with an emergency room what the percentage of each kind of was, how much of what you saw was chronic versus how much you saw was acute. The answer that I get back from everybody is so astonishingly consistent. And we're talking, what, it's been 10 years, 20 years since you've been in the emergency room. At least 10 years. What percent, in hindsight, looking back, what percentage of the cases that you saw were related to chronic disease versus acute disease, meaning that trauma, the gunshot, the car crash, that kind of thing?
Man, I bet it's 10% was actually trauma.
That's so consistent. 85, 90% is the answer I get almost every single time. Yeah, it's fascinating. And yeah, I also think it's really interesting that you mentioned not only the health of the people that you were dealing with, but also the health of the people in the industry, the low testosterone, the balding. You were noticing that everybody in doing what you were doing was also suffering with health as well.
Yeah, I got up to, so I graduated at like 165 pounds, right? And then I got up to 238 when I was working EMS, right? Like, I gained a ton of weight. And since then, and lost about 80 pounds, but then, got the dad bod rocking, I guarantee you right now. But the the health of everybody, and not just the physical health, the mental health is atrocious. It's bad. And then you get a lot of this addictive personality in those realms. And I understand why now. I did not then. And that's across the board of healthcare and emergency services.
Okay, gotcha. Wow. And then, what kind of path did your grandpa take as far as like, did he do conventional treatments for cancer?
Absolutely, 100% conventional. I dipped my toe a little bit into that, trying to help, but I didn't know anything. Um, and so it would read, The Alkaline Cure is one of the first books I remember attempting to get them to at least pay attention to diet. But yeah, everything was 100% conventional. Did absolutely nothing outside of that.
Okay, gotcha. And then when you asked the question about nutrition to your doctor about your son, what made you even consider that food would be a part of cancer, and what made you kind of, I guess, like smell a rat when your own doctor said, like, no, it has nothing to do with cancer?
I think it was my childhood, growing up in an agrarian community. You can see what is essentially cause and effect, right? Like, so why would we feed animals certain things and not certain things, right? Like, why were some animals and dogs and stuff developing tumors and others weren't? Why were wolves not having these tumors and then our household pets having them? My grandpa raised broiler chickens for Tyson. I got to see this attempt of creating a Franken chicken and getting it to grow fast, super fast. And what were they feeding? And so, like, just I think a lot of those basics really helped me uh the, question that. But then the time on the EMS, everybody I saw super sick had, because when you're in EMS, very few people plan an emergency, right? That's why it's called an emergency. So, like, when you're going into houses real time. That's not, oh, let me clean my house and then call the ambulance, right? So you get to see behind the scenes real time. And so I can assure you those sick people's lifestyles uh were very different than what you would think of for healthy. So it was just some of those type things that really stuck out for me, that made me there was no way that food did not matter.
Got it.
There's no way.
I just think it's interesting that it's so obvious to somebody like you, but nine out of 10 other people could have been doing your exact same job and it would not have been as obvious to them. That wouldn't have stood out really at all. And that's why so few people find this message to begin with. But yeah, I do find it very interesting. So as the diagnosis came down, insanely difficult diagnosis for a 5-year-old, of course. What courses of action did you end up deciding to go on, and how did his cancer journey go?
Well, because I didn't know anything, and you don't really actually have very many choices when it's a kid. So, like, you're going through the system. So, like, anybody that thinks, well, I wouldn't do that. Yeah, yes, you would. Yes, you would. So, we went conventional. That's why I always say that, the doctors are going to do their part, God is going to do His, and I was going to do mine. Right? Like, I trusted them. I trusted them. Take care of my baby, and I'm going to make sure this other things are done. So he did have surgery. He did have chemo. He did have radiation. We did go through the entirety of that protocol. But I also clamped down on the diet. I also did a lot of stuff with mindset. Like, one of my favorite podcasts that doesn't even sound like it matters for cancer was with Jason Redman. And so, he was a Navy SEAL that wrote a book on mindset. It's absolutely beautiful. And so, just that whole idea of he was never sick and we were always just getting stronger and getting better. Certain supplements that, I'm not where I was then. Uh, Playing outside, being a kid, being all of those things really, really matter a lot. Uh, and now I have the science to prove how lucky uh, I was on some of the things that we implemented.
Yeah, I think that mindset piece is so important when it comes to things like cancer. I watched my mom suffer and eventually die with breast cancer almost 20 years ago, but she survived with it for 7.5 years. And one of her biggest things was her own faith in the Mormon religion, which she found very helpful. And, she would just like have the idea, like, even on my worst day, I'm going to try to find something to be happy about, something to be grateful for. And I do think that that was a big piece as to why she lived as long as she did,
Yeah,
even dealing with some of those conventional treatments.
yeah.
So yeah, I think that's huge and very, very underrated. Let's start with kind of the nutritional piece. You mentioned all kinds of like different diets, and being in the agricultural world, and seeing what people have been eating that are making their way to the emergency room. Tell us about your process of what you learned about diet as it relates to cancer, especially, and where you are today with your understanding.
Yeah, so I think I started the way a lot of people do, right? And that's like the China study, and then a lot of the alternative cancer diets are going to be around plant based, and so I went through all of that. Then I read Stephen Gundry's book, Plant Paradox, and it started giving me some questions on plants, like, do what I think I know about plants, is this accurate? And so kept diving. Dave Asprey had a massive impact on me early on. And so like the bulletproof diet, and he's talking about eat meat. Terry Walls, she had a huge impact too, talking about the paleo. And so I went from this very plant-based ideology early on, more towards this paleo, more towards meat, and more towards understanding uh, this carnivore was working for people. Carnivore is working for people, right? Why was it working? Why was it not fueling cancer? Why what is going on? And then Seafried, Nasha Winters, looking at this metabolic approach. Is food having an impact on metabolism? So I just kept trying to piece and understand all of these wide realm of ideas, and came to where I am now. From the quantum biology side, and diet, I think we've complicated. First, I think it should be local, seasonal, and natural, like whatever that is to wherever you are for whenever you are, right? So like the diet in Salt Lake City in December is going to look different from me in Arkansas, or Paul Saladino in Costa Rica, or Max Goldhain in Australia. Like, this is completely different timings and locations for where we are. And so to me, if this natural and this ancestrally appropriate, this is where you can start looking at a lot of like the work of Weston A. Price, right? More of the older stuff than the newer stuff, actually, his work. And you see that these certain lifestyles and rules of nature or God that aren't being broken, and they have extreme health, right? Like, so the more we get away from those, the more disease and sickness we have. So one caveat to all of this is, like, in a temperate climate in winter, right? So like, if we're looking at Utah, or Montana, Canada, whatever, that is a carnivore diet. Like, ancestrally speaking, we are going to be extremely heavy meat based during the winter in a temperate climate. That shouldn't be hyperbolic. It is what it is. So now, when you're in season and certain things are available, just look at nature, right? Like, we've got fruits, but very short seasonings, right? Like blackberries, or some little strawberries, or plums, like whatever. You have this wide range of things that come into season and then they're gone. And so, like, I think that we've adulterated this whole ideology around nutrition anyways. And it's super simple: local, seasonal, and natural.
Yeah. No, I absolutely love that. On that note, and maybe I'm overthinking this, but I've been really pondering this quite a bit lately. You mentioned agriculture and our ability to grow plants for our own uses. If I walk about a mile and a half away from my house, there's a cornfield. Somebody clearly has cleared the land and just planted all this corn. It's growing. It's not available now. It will be in like a month or two. In your mind, is there a difference between what we grow agriculturally on purpose for our own uses versus things that just grow kind of naturally where you would find them, say, like on a hike? Like, for example, if I go out into a hike, I don't run into cauliflower. I don't run into carrots that I can really recognize, that I would recognize at the stores being these big, sweet orange things. I don't see those things. Do you think about those two things differently, or is
Absolutely.
agriculture a way that we can, eat more of the plants in that season, and that's fine?
Yeah. So like, this is where we've got to get into the nuances, and I think this is a beautiful, beautiful question. So when you see that corn field, it goes back to exactly what I said. We are breaking the laws of nature or God. Like, that is what it's doing. That seedless watermelon that we're eating is not natural. It is breaking the rules of nature or God, because seeds are for reproduction, right? Like, so when you go into that, I think it's a great point. It's extremely pertinent. Agriculture has adulterated nature, and that's going to be offensive to a lot of people. I own a grocery store. This is what I do. I sell all the things that have been adulterated. But when you look at it objectively, yes, there is a difference between what that natural strawberry is going to look like, or one of the varieties that we have cultivars now. So I think you're spot on. It is not the same thing.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I think about, you just mentioned strawberries. Dude, the strawberry bush that I have in my backyard gives me 10 strawberries that are like the size of the tip of my pinky. And if I leave them on the counter overnight in an air conditioned house, they're gone. Like they're all shriveled and terrible. And it just, yeah, it's an interesting thing to ponder. I look at the corn in the cornfield and I see a monocrop. I see an annual plant that's not going to develop strong roots. I see soil depletion coming at some point. And yeah, I would rather eat the corn than eat the corn tortilla chips or whatever. Like, I think that's a step in the right direction. But when you think about it in the way that you're explaining local, seasonal, whatever, I would argue even in the fall, like even in the late summer when there are things available, dude, around me, there's so little plant food that's even available. Like you again, do agriculture, you could have a garden. The garden doesn't even make sense calorically because you're putting so many calories into getting so few at the end of the season into something you're depleting, again, the soil. So it's just an interesting thing to think about. Like, how few berry bushes do you actually see? How few apple trees do you actually see when it's not in the context of agriculture or somebody growing something on purpose, you know?
Yeah. No, I mean, ancestrally speaking, we are absolutely meant to be eating meat and eggs and having some seasonal things here and there
Yeah.
from plants.
Okay.
I mean, that's just appropriate.
Yeah.
And that that perfectly lines up with all history. There is no plant-based cultures anywhere
Yeah.
that have survived over the eons.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. I think it's interesting to ponder, like you said. Hopefully, our audience knows quite a bit about cancer. You mentioned Dr. Thomas Seyfried. We've interviewed him. Sam Apple, who wrote the book Ravenous, all about Otto Warburg and his work. But for the person who's maybe never heard of this before, can you explain how we understand cancer today? It's interesting because we can ask where it comes from, but it comes within sight of us. And what are some of the theories, the metabolic kind of theories of cancer and how we understand that today?
Yeah, so this is deep, and there's going to be a lot of opinions and big feelings on this. One more thing I want to hit on about the food. Food is a photosynthetic barcode. Okay, so it is all about protons and electrons. That's why we eat. Okay, and so this is a very important bridge as we get into the cancer topic. So that is going to have a different reading, so to speak, from where we are, timing and location. It's really, really, really important to understand from this quantum physics aspect. So we have this thing called the electron transport chain, right? This is in our mitochondria. This is how we produce ATP. We do a lot of other things within the mitochondria, but we don't have it's not for fats, it's not for carbohydrates, it's not for proteins, it's for electrons, right? So all food has to be, whether it's a fat or carbohydrate or protein, it has to be broken down into protons and electrons. It's essentially hydrogen, right? One proton, one electron. This is what's fed through with proton gradient all the way from NAD through the ATPase. All right. That can be completely altered and destroyed when you have a mismatch of signaling. Okay, so even with meat, so a New Zealand lamb eaten in Utah is going to have a different barcode for you. And so carnivore is too myopic, right? It's plant-based. It still has, because you have the plant into the animal, in the animal into you, you have all of this transfer of energy. All energy is then transferred through light. And that's what's really hard for a lot of people to grasp. This is not hyperbolic when we're talking about photosynthesis. We all know this. You have no plant growth if you do not have light, right? Light hits a plant, we create sugars and structure. That we learned this in 3rd grade. So when we have that understanding and we know how these atoms are put together within there that create this mass that goes into the animal and then us, it gets better and better. Now we also need to throw in a little bit of this whole magnetism piece. So I was saying, given the Australia and New Zealand example with Utah. So in the northern and southern hemispheres, you have alternating magnetic conditioning, right? So we have an opposite of nuclear spin based on the magnetism. So everybody's seen these toroidal fields where it comes out and it arches and it comes back. It's what a magnet does. Shake up a magnet with some iron filings and it's going to form this. So when you do the opposite within what your body set up, you create chaos. So chaos, inflammation, all of these things are extremely important. So when you hear what Seyfried's going to say is that cancer is a metabolic disease, right? And it's all about food and fasting and diet. Well, partly I agree that it's metabolic, but what happens we know this from the unbelievable work of, say, Fritz Popp, Maywin Ho, Roland Van Wyck, that all life emits light. Okay. These are called ultra weak biophotons. Everything, including that apple that we get, it's going to have a different expression of light. Okay. DNA is actually a light antenna. It absorbs it. Get Roland Van Wyck's book. He's laid out every bit of this. Okay. So what happens is light hits DNA. This light is then stored in the H's. You see the helix, the spiral. These little H's actually store these biophotons. This is inside chromatin. It's inside the nucleus. The expression of genes is through light. Okay. This probably sounds nuts to some people, but so for example, P53, this is the tumor suppressor gene. If it is not expressed, then we have uncontrolled cell growth, mitosis, right? We do not have apoptosis. Cells do not die. They're not cleaned up. We do have no autophagy. Okay. So when P53 gets darkened, the inability to express with this light, it doesn't function properly. So what we are told from even this metabolic approach is that it's so much better. I'm not trying to poo-poo on this idea, but it just does not go deep enough. Is that somehow by eating carbohydrates, we increase the reactive oxygen species, and this causes just chaos, and then this causes damage to the cell, and then it grows and it goes out of control. Okay, that is unbelievably myopic. What happens is that we have got to have the appropriate environment for the mitochondria to function. So yes, it is a mitochondrial disease. So what allows this mitochondria to be coherent, right? Well, this is where you've got to look at your complexes, right? The inner mitochondrial membrane, your complexes of the mitochondria. We have essentially NAD, and then we go to oxygen, right? Oxygen is your terminal electron acceptor. Remember, electron transport chain. This is what pushes it through. Mitochondria produce carbon dioxide. This is extremely important. This is a signaling molecule, okay? It does produce RNS and ROS, right? Reactive oxygen, reactive nitrogen species. These are also signaling molecules. This ties directly into the magnetochemistry of how the body works as well. Mitochondria produce water, and this is metabolic water, right? This is a different kind of water than what we drink. It's a deuterium depleted. This is an insulator. So we have mitochondria. If you read Nick Lane's work, Power, Sex, and Suicide, everybody should read it. Oxygen is another one of his. So important to understand the basis behind what I'm saying. Mitochondria produce light, and they also produce electricity, equivalent to 30 million volts. Now, that is lightning, okay? Now, when we're talking about scales, right? Charge comes through scales. The bigger, the lower it is, the smaller, the higher it is. So on the equivalent of 30 million volts, we have to ask ourselves, how do we keep from getting shocked if our mitochondria are producing this much electricity, right? Fair question. Well, we produce an insulator. The insulator is the metabolic water. So what then absorbs this light, right? And this is where it's really important to also get into the work of Robert O. Becker, right? The Body Electric. It's an extremely important book. When you understand that this electrical signal is happening, And this is how everything functions, and that a light is turned into this DC current for regeneration. This is how we unlock, stem cell depots. This is how we heal, we regenerate, is having the appropriate DC current. Okay, it's 1/trillionth of 1 amp. It's very, very, very small. So we have to take 30 million and then reduce it down substantially. Casey, what is so important about this is there's an absolute master symphony of the greatest concerto of all time going on inside every one of our cells at all time. And when it gets thrown off, when mitochondria aren't producing these ultra weak biophotons that then go to the DNA to be able to have a genetic expression, nothing works properly, right? And we throw that off with the lack of sun, the lack of infrared, the lack of UV. UV is not killing people and causing cancer. When you have this symphony that's lined up appropriately, everything works. When we don't have the appropriate inputs, nothing works. And what I just laid out here is it has nothing to do with food. It's everything about the environment that we're completely disconnected from.
I'm going to have to go back and listen to that at least 2 more times. It's absolutely very well explained. I can tell you've given this a ton of consideration. Would it be fair to say that food is an indirect kind of contributor to cancer because of the light, like that you talked about, as far as like the light in the barcode of the food, or is even that just too much of a stretch?
Yeah, see, and this is the thing where you got to be careful, because food does matter. I'm not absolutely saying it doesn't. So anything that creates chaos, right? And this is a photosynthetic barcode mismatch. Anything that does that is going to lead to improper gene expression. Okay, it's not a genetic disease. It's just the way at which the everything operates, right? It's that operating system inside of the cell. Yes, food matters. Absolutely. But food matters for a lot of different reasons than what we are told from this macro perspective. So one thing that food matters a whole lot is on that deuterium conversation. And we're not going to go too deep into this and make it crazy, but anything that's a processed food is going to have an extremely high deuterium content. Okay. Sugars are higher in deuterium than fats. So deuterium is an isotope of hydrogen. That means it is a hydrogen that has a neutron and a proton versus just a proton. Okay. Now this does sounds pretty insignificant, but when we're talking about going back to those angstroms, right? Like we're going super small into the mitochondria, it destroys everything. So your ATP ACE, and this is only one aspect, ATP ACE is this little quantum motor that kicks off with the power of electrons and protons, kicks off ATP, right? And we're all told about this. This is what Warburg metabolism is known for: lower ATP. It's fermentation. Deuterium also has a different ability to stick, and the bonding of it is harder to break than that of hydrogen, right? Hydrogen is extremely important. Deuterium's not all bad, but it's the overabundance. This destroys the mitochondria. Too much deuterium. But this is also why there's efficacy within keto or within carnivore, because those are a deuterium depleted diet, right? High sugars, high deuterium. It's not that it's the sugar. Okay, so that is an extremely important nuance. Yes, food plays into it.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you for explaining that. Um, I'm so far outside of my comfort zone as far as like asking the right questions. So if I'm not asking the right questions, feel free to guide me the right way. Light. I find this so fascinating. Of course, in the last, I don't know, 10 years, 20 years, we've learned a little bit more about the importance of getting light, the importance of red light, the difference between light outside, light inside. Can you tell us what is going wrong with our light exposure today that would have been very different, 1,000 years ago, where cancer maybe was not as big of an issue as it is today?
Yeah. I think a really good example of this is when we look at ancient Egypt. Okay. For one, they're in a desert, so this is problematic. The environment's changed over time with that. But for the most part, they're in the desert. When we look at those that were outside versus the royalty, the aristocracy, the lifestyles were very different. Okay, so a lot of them lived in palace, lived inside. In the royalty side, they don't see a sunrise. They're using fire. They have all of the modern diseases that we have. Whereas when you're looking at those that were outside, the ones building the pyramids, that they did not. Okay, It's extremely important to realize that some of this stuff, because you hear, well, we've always had cancer. We've always had, well, it is much more prevalent in certain groups. This is where you have like Peter Unger, who's at the University of Arkansas, has done all the studies on the bones. It's fascinating. The ancient Egyptian royalty had the same diseases that we see in modern. Okay. So the lifestyle was what's different. Hide from the sun, be inside, use artificial light. So once you start understanding that context, that foundation, and you start piecing it together, you look in the late 1800s when we had the light bulb, and you follow a chart based off of more technology, more artificial living, and chronic disease. It mirrors perfectly. It lines up. It is way more in line than this food changes over time. And it started prior to 1900. When we have the inputs for body that are artificial versus naturally, it's a very, very stark contrast. So one way that I think a lot of people are going to understand this is from circadian biology, right? We know that the sun rises and the sun sets, it's dark, and we go through this all the time. We know that we have these different increases and reduction in certain hormones, cortisol, melatonin, right? We have this fluctuation within the day, right? What we're not taught is that we have what's called the TCA cycle, and that when we don't have appropriate infrared input from watching the sunrise, right? Let's early morning sun, we cannot accurately do beta oxidation, right? This is fat metabolism. So we can't metabolize fat if we're TCA cycles not spinning clockwise, but we're going to promote a ketogenic diet, right? Like this is where it's super myopic, a high fat diet, and we don't have the appropriate light inputs. So we need to get into understanding a certain protein that's called POMC, pro-opioid melanocortin. Okay. This is a very large protein that's cleaved into different products that are absolutely crucial for life. And so the end results are things like immune modulation, right? Pain, creating a tan, melanin, right? On and on, satiety. Like all of these things are actually required UVB light, okay, light to be activated to have these cleavage products. So you have like beta endorphins, metenkephalin, alpha, beta, gamma, MSH. These are just some of the things that have a massive, massive impact, and they do not work without light. Another example of something that doesn't work without light that we should all know because it's been everywhere is vitamin D, right? This is sulfated cholesterol. Well, if we do not have UVB specifically, we have no conversion, right? So it should not be surprising that there are other things, and a lot of other things, that require light to function properly within the body if we know what vitamin D is. Now, the whole supplementing versus natural, it's not the same thing, okay? So I don't want anybody to think that you can cheat the system, right, and take a oral vitamin D and get what you would be getting from the sun, because it's just not how it works. When we have excessive, this would be especially for the metabolically function or focused people, we know unequivocally that EMFs, which blue light is an EMF, raises blood sugar. Okay, don't eat, get under a blue light, and it raises blood sugar. And that shouldn't surprise anybody that's a diabetic. That, what do you mean something outside of foods is going to raise our blood sugar? When we know that being stressed raises your blood sugar, right? Like any diabetic knows that, before they have a stressful event, they're going to go to the doctor, something happens in life, they don't eat, and their blood sugar skyrockets. Okay, light does the same thing. The flip side of that is infrared light actually lowers blood sugar. And this goes back to the mitochondria, right? The efficiency of the mitochondria to run requires blue light or infrared light. So when it's more efficient and it's burning more, right? It's using more electrons, it's breaking down this glucose. Now we're feeding and we're operating, we're lowering it. Whereas the blue light actually slows down the function of the mitochondria. Therefore, you have a buildup. So this is just where, like, All of these molecules I'm talking about signaling, like RNS, ROS, CO2. You also have superoxide dismutase. So like there is no pulse at complex 1 within a diabetic because they're blue light toxic. So you don't have the appropriate signaling molecules that are even occurring because of the improper lighting. So I know that that's a lot, and we hit on a lot of different things there, but the way that light affects biology is massive, and it's so much bigger than anybody really wants to give credit for, and it is way, way bigger than seed oils and red 40.
That is absolutely fascinating. I really appreciate that explanation. And yeah, I've heard you talk about the link between the light and diabetes, and I find that absolutely fascinating as well. But most people already innately know that going out in the sunshine is not good for them. They're worried about cancer. They are worried about going out without sunglasses or slathering on sunscreen. Where did we get this idea? If light is so critically important and we need to get full spectrum sunlight as much as possible, why do we think the sun is so bad for us today?
Because we've been lied to. Right. And so like the very first thing that we need to realize is that incentives dictate outcome. So if my paycheck requires you being sick and me giving you a service to deal with that sickness, I want you to be sick. And I think that we need to really come to terms with that. As altruistic as we think that our doctors are and how amazing they are in a system that profits from us being sick, period. Okay, so like to think that they're going to be the ones that change us is asinine. Okay, so when we look at a dermatologist, they're going to tell you that the sun causes this hyperpigmentation. It doesn't. It doesn't. It's blue light. So, for example, the blue light stimulates melanocytes. It actually creates this hyperpigmentation without the next step that is UVB light that converts into melanin, right? This is a tan. Melanin is so much more than a tan, though. It's an extremely important conversation, if not maybe the number one that we really need to have. But we are told that the sun is causing the things that's actually coming from this blue light coming off of a LED, the blue light that's coming off of your phone, the xenon lights that our dentists are using that's where they look into our mouths, right? Like those things are causing an aberrant effect within our tissues. Okay. So another way that we know this is, and fact check me on everything, guys. Like Google it. We know that blue light is used in burn patients to regenerate tissue. Okay. Blue light is used in burn patients to help heal. So, what happens if we are doing that on healthy skin? We're increasing growth. What is too much growth without the ability to turn off? Cancer. So, what I'm telling you is you've been lied to about that. We know this with all the melanoma studies. Why does Washington State have more melanoma than Florida or Arizona or Texas per capita? Right? Why does Vermont have more cancer than California? Right? Like melanoma. Like all of these things matter. Why is Sweden have more cancer than Italy? If the sun was causing, and I'm talking about melanoma when I'm saying this example, if it was the sun, why do those graphs not lay this out? Why is it that the higher the vitamin D, the lower the incidence of skin cancer if the sun was causing it, when we know that purple band of light, UVB, is what synthesizes vitamin D, right? So like when you start objectively looking at this, it makes no sense whatsoever. The other one that I just despise on top of dermatologists is optometrists. Okay. Everybody is myopic. We have a macular degeneration epidemic. We have all of these things going on with our eyes from cataracts and everything. And everybody wears sunglasses, which is about the worst possible thing you can do. If you want to die and have Parkinson's, wear sunglasses. Okay. So do that. And that's a good way to just have a very short and miserable life. What you've got to have is infrared and UV into the eyes for everything to work properly. So this goes back. When you look at the retina, this actually operates on a Warburg metabolism. Why? Because it's trying to keep this vascular proliferation. So we don't want pressure inside of the eye. The eye is this structure that is a pressure sensitive organ. So when we increase pressure, what do we get? Well, we get myopia. We get oblong in the eye. We get macular degeneration. This is that excessive pressure in there. Cataracts form to protect us from the blue light toxicity. So how are we're seeing over and over and over, and this is coming out in the literature now, that infrared light is reversing these conditions. Now think about that. That's really bad news for those that sell LASIK surgery. That's really bad news for the ones that sell glasses and contacts, right? So when you understand having the appropriate light inputs into your eyes for proper eye health, and that the metabolism of things like the testicles and your retina have a cancer metabolism, you really start questioning the whole paradigm on why are cancer cells utilizing this form of anaerobic glycolysis. All right. So like I hope that gives you just maybe some like, wow, I want to understand some more of this and that, because what I'm saying is we've been lied to about absolutely everything, and we're going to have to question everything.
Wow. This episode is not short of hot takes, let me tell you. This has been amazing. This morning, I was fortunate. I had two clients. They both canceled, so I essentially was paid to go out and do whatever I wanted. So I did my favorite thing, which is I grabbed my dog, I took off my shirt, I walked in the sun. I've already gotten 4 or 5 miles of walking around the lake by my house, which was lovely. I got to catch just a little bit of the sunrise a little bit later than I wanted to, but the sun coming up. And you look at me and my skin, and I have developed over the years a pretty good tan. This is not this is not the skin condition I used to have. If you go back maybe 10 years, I would have been much more pale, probably would have been using sunscreen at the time, and I would get terrible sunburns. I don't ever get sunburn anymore. I can be out. I definitely feel a difference in the harshness of the sun if it's near the solstice and it's near solar noon around me. I try to use shade a little bit more. If I'm going to be outside around solar noon, I can just feel when my skin, it kind of seems like it's had enough. But for the contrast of somebody like me who has worked on this for a while, I trained my skin up, early in the year when the sun is low on the horizon to start to expose myself to more of that melanin. What is the difference between somebody, again, like myself, who's worked on this for a while versus, say, somebody who lives in Toronto? They have an office job, and they decide to take a vacation to Ecuador in the third week of June. How is there much difference between how those two people should be dealing with light?
Yeah, absolutely. So like for one, the example you use with the Toronto person, they are blue light toxic, and they do not have what we refer to as a solar callus, right? So they don't have a tan. They don't have the ability. So we have two main mechanisms at which we deal with this solar input. And I really want people to think of the skin as a solar panel for your brain, a solar panel for the entire operating system that is your body, okay? And so we have to have that. So like for example, take a tree, pull off all of its leaves. That's what you're doing when you cover up your skin. You're removing all of these little solar panels that you have. And to become more efficient of a solar panel, we produce melanin, right? We produce more melanin. We also have what's called orthotic acid, right? And this is a really, really important way in which we deal with this sun exposure. The process of melanin creation is so important, and it takes time. So your question's a good one. And that's what most people do is they don't prepare at all. They have no infrared inputs, and they go hang out for 1 week out of 52 on a beach and get fried when they have an indoor lifestyle, right? Like I'm not saying you're not going to get burnt. Like that's a problem, but your lifestyle is the problem. So in order to prime, this is where we go back to that palm seed conversation. In order to prime this system to create melanin, you have to understand melanogenesis, and that is infrared priming. Then this stimulates your melanocytes to produce melanin. But in order to do that, you've got to have tyrosinase, you got to have copper, you've got to have vitamin C. All of these things are extremely important in order to create proper melanin, right? So like we've all seen like this, I attempted a Pinterest craft, right? And it's like this little horrible stick horse thing versus this beautiful thing they saw on Pinterest. Like I want you to think of like melanin like that too. Do we have good functioning melanin, or do we have the appropriate, like that beautiful unicorn of Pinterest melanin, right? If we do not have the appropriate building block precursors, we don't have the appropriate melanin. And this is why you see a lot of people on some of these, and I'm going to say it's long term is probably not going to be good, but extremely high dose copper regimens, right? They don't burn, they're having huge benefits. And it goes back to everything that we're saying, because copper is so important for building that. So the other input there is light, you've got to have this staging of infrared to UVA to UVB to produce melanin. And then the flip side of that, think about how a day starts out. We have sunrise, it's all infrared. Then we get into a little bit of UVA, and then we get into more UVA, and then UVB, and then UVB goes away. It's just UVA and infrared. And then a sunset, we look at it, it's red, it's these gorgeous colors. That's all infrared. So we need this entire symphony of light spectrums to come in, right, to make sure that we have the appropriately conditioned melanin and skin in building that solar callus. We're also stimulating vitamin D. Vitamin D and cholesterol are actually light ferries, ferry as in like a boat that carries and transport light. Hemoglobin does the same thing. Casey, something else that like other people have I've never heard anybody talk about, because I think that blood pressure is only a lisinopril deficiency, right? Like that's the only possible reason that we have high blood pressure is a pharmaceutical deficiency. UVA works to release nitric oxide in the skin where it hits. So only where it hits. Okay. So nitric oxide is a vasodilator. So if we're wearing a shirt and it just hits our arms, we can have a nitric oxide release there, but not where it's being blocked by the clothes we're wearing or sunscreen, right? That's really, really important. So this vasodilation it makes blood vessels bigger, right? And so this allows more blood to come through there. Your hemoglobin is actually another chromophore. It's a heme-based protein. It's iron-based. It absorbs this electromagnetic energy and it actually transfers it throughout the entire body. This is really, really important. Hemoglobin does more than just transports oxygen. So all of these different light signals, it just keeps going deeper and deeper and deeper and more interconnected. When we block it, nothing works properly.
Got it. Wow, that's well explained. I really love that. If we go to practical advice, when you're talking to somebody, maybe they do have an office job, they drive their car every day, they're watching TV late at night. On the practical side of things, as far as overall health, what are the top, say, 2 or 3 things that you would recommend for most people that could benefit them? Again, on a kind of macro, general, 30,000-foot kind of view, what are 3 things that people can be thinking about as far as practical advice?
The big two, the big two, just overgeneralizations, is more sun and less artificial light. Like, so whatever that means, right? If that means turn it off and open a window, that means go outside for your breaks. That means like not watching TV at midnight, right? Not using LED light vanities, like getting a little red light plugged in the bathroom to where you're not blaring yourself. Get a film that goes over the light in your refrigerator. Like once you start realizing how much artificial light that we're being bombarded with at all times that are unbelievably inappropriate timing, you start seeing this. So like, how do you mitigate the least amount? So blue blocker glasses, turn the phone screens red, get blue block covers, use iris software. Like you're all red. Like this whole screen for me is red, and I have actually a reptile light right here. So an incandescent that adds UVA and infrared into the room while I'm sitting here having this conversation. So like you start just bringing in as much natural as possible and limiting the artificial, and that is absolutely life-changing.
Amazing. Yeah. And somebody could be really pragmatic about that. Like you said, taking breaks outside. Like I would get so much pushback when I would recommend this and somebody say, well, I work at an office. Like I can't get outside. Like you can get outside. You can take breaks. And rather than, go to the lounge, you can go outside. I've had managers where I've requested like, hey, we're doing this meeting in an office. Why don't we take a walking meeting outside? We're going to talk about the same stuff anyway. We don't need a computer. Why don't we just walk around for 30 minutes or an hour, as long as the meeting is, and do this outside? And there's so many other benefits to that. So I really appreciate that. I appreciate all the practical advice you've given us today. I want to go back to your own personal story and the story of your son. How did his cancer go? How is he today? Give us an update on everything that he went through and how he is today.
Yeah, no, he's doing great. He's 11. We went from stage 4 to cancer free in 8 months. We just stay on top of it, right? Like I can't turn it off. That's why we do what we do. I homeschool. The biggest reason is for the lights. I don't want them sitting in that garbage lights all day. So like I understand all the excuses because everybody gives them to me too, of like I can't do this or I can't do that. Well, you can do a lot. It's just what are you willing to do? What are you willing to sacrifice, or how are you willing to adjust? So I homeschool. I own a business that's outside. I make people come shop outside, right? Like you can't, you are the captain of your ship. That life is only yours. And so if you're not going to take care of yourself, who are you? Who is going to?
Yeah, that's such a good point. I'm just curious too, like as you know, your son, stage 4, correct? He was pretty deep as far as the cancer goes. Were
Yeah.
any of the medical professionals like curious about what you did, and the ways you kind of dealt with things a little bit differently, or did they in general just not really care too much about it?
I think that's probably one of the most frustrating points for me is they were always amazed with how well he was doing, always amazed with how good his skin was, always amazed with uh, everything, and did not
Wow.
care
Wow.
why.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, it totally blows my mind, but it makes sense the way you explained it earlier. Like, if, who is making the money in this situation? And as Dr. Seyfried often says, cancer is a revenue-creating disease. So when you think about that, you think about the way the mainstream is dealing with things, and it really, yeah, it explains why we haven't really made a lot of progress with cancer anyway. And this conversation has been so unbelievably enlightening, pun intended for sure. So thank you, Logan. Clearly, you have spent a lot of time researching this, and you've also been able to not only get into the weeds of the science behind this stuff, but also be able to explain it the way that a bum like me could really understand. So I really appreciate that, and I'm so grateful that Buzz and Bruce and you were able to connect and introduce us. Like I said, this was a wonderful conversation. For now, Logan, where can people go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Yeah. No, Casey, thanks for having me, man. Sowing Prosperity. So SOWING prosperity .com. That'll pull up like the work we do, the podcast, Logan Duvall, my name will pull up everything on YouTube and different podcasts. And um, I really think the science can get deep and complex, but the truths are so unbelievably fundamental and just right there that it's hard to argue with it. And when you see it, uh, like turn off the artificial lights and get in the sun. Like that shouldn't be hard to understand it. It has an impact. I understand the science can be, but it's we've these frontal lobes is what made all of this complicated.
Yeah, I love that. I love that the practical advice is very simple, and that yeah, you can go a little bit deeper into the science. I would recommend anybody go and listen to your podcast because you do a great job. You're a great host. You have some amazing guests that get into the weeds on this stuff. But I really appreciate you, like I said, to make this practical and reachable for most people is really amazing. So Logan Duvall, thank you so very much for all of your amazing work. I know you're very busy. One more thing as well, if somebody is in your neighborhood, where can they check out your market?
So we're in North Little Rock, Arkansas. So,
Got it.
me and McGee are just farmers markets in Arkansas. We pull up.
Okay, awesome. We'll link all of that in the show notes. And for now, Logan, thank you so very much again for all of your amazing work. And thank you for sharing us today, all the practical tips that we can incorporate in our lives. We really appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Likewise, Casey. Thank you, buddy.
Absolutely. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.